In September 2015, a notice quietly appeared on the website of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. It was not a press conference. There were no executives present, just a document outlining a violation of the Clean Air Act. The subject was Volkswagen. The allegation was precise. Nearly 11 million diesel vehicles worldwide had been equipped with software designed to cheat emissions tests. Within days, Volkswagen's market value dropped by more than 25 billion euros. Within weeks, the company admitted the truth. What followed was not a recall, but a reckoning. This is the story of how the world's largest automaker built its reputation on engineering excellence, then spent over $35 billion trying to repair the damage caused by a single line of code. At the time, Volkswagen was not a struggling company. It was the opposite. In 2015, Volkswagen Group controlled 12 brands, including Audi, Porsche, Bentley, Lamborghini, Skoda, and Seat. It sold more than 10 million vehicles annually and was locked in a race with Toyota for the title of world's largest car manufacturer. Its brand promise was simple and powerful. German engineering, precision, reliability, trust. In markets across Europe and North America, Volkswagen had spent decades positioning itself as the sensible alternative to luxury brands. Not flashy, not experimental. Just solid, honest cars built the right way. Diesel sat at the center of that promise. For years, Volkswagen promoted its diesel engines as clean, efficient, and environmentally responsible. Advertisements emphasized low emissions and high mileage. In the United States, where diesel passenger cars had long struggled with a reputation for noise and pollution, Volkswagen saw an opportunity. If it could crack the American market with diesel, it could differentiate itself from competitors and gain market share without sacrificing performance. The strategy was called Clean Diesel, and for a time, it worked. By 2014, Volkswagen had become the top-selling diesel brand in the United States. Nearly 1 in 4 Volkswagen vehicles sold in the country ran on diesel fuel. Customers were told they were buying something rare. A car that delivered strong torque, excellent fuel economy, and emissions low enough to meet strict US standards. Dealers repeated the message. Regulators approved the vehicles. Independent reviewers praised the technology. On paper, Volkswagen had achieved what others could not. In reality, the technology did not exist. The problem Volkswagen faced was not ambition. It was physics. Diesel engines produce higher levels of nitrogen oxides than gasoline engines. Reducing those emissions requires complex after-treatment systems that add cost, weight, and maintenance challenges. Engineers inside Volkswagen knew this. Internal documents later revealed that as early as 2006, teams were warning management that meeting US emission standards with the desired performance and cost targets was unlikely. A choice had to be made. Redesign the engines, accept lower performance, increase costs, or walk away from the market. Volkswagen chose none of those options. Instead, engineers developed software that could detect when a vehicle was undergoing laboratory emissions testing. When the car sensed it was on a test bench, the engine switched into a special mode that reduced emissions to legal levels. Once back on the road, the system deactivated. Real-world emissions could be up to 40 times the legal limit. To the driver, nothing felt different. To regulators, the cars appeared compliant. To Volkswagen, the problem was solved. Or so it seemed. For nearly a decade, the deception went undetected. The exposure did not come from a rival automaker or a government whistleblower. It came from a small non-profit organization. In 2013, the International Council on Clean Transportation commissioned a study to compare diesel emissions in Europe and the United States. The research was conducted by engineers at West Virginia University. They tested Volkswagen diesel cars on public roads using portable emissions equipment. The results were impossible to ignore. Vehicles that passed laboratory tests with ease were emitting dramatically higher pollution during normal driving. At first, Volkswagen denied there was a problem. Then it blamed technical issues. Then it offered software updates that changed nothing. Over the next year, regulators pressed for answers. Behind closed doors, engineers realized there was no way to fix the issue without revealing the truth. In August 2015, Volkswagen executives finally admitted to US authorities that the vehicles were equipped with defeat devices. On September 18th, the EPA went public. The fallout was immediate. Volkswagen CEO Martin Winterkorn resigned within days. He had spent his career inside the company and was widely credited with transforming Volkswagen into a global powerhouse. In his resignation statement, he said he was stunned by the events and denied personal wrongdoing. But leadership changes did little to slow the damage. Lawsuits flooded in from governments, consumers, and investors. Sales stalled. Trust evaporated. The financial consequences were staggering. By 2020, Volkswagen had paid more than $35 billion in fines, settlements, buybacks, and legal costs related to Dieselgate. In the United States alone, the company agreed to a $14.7 billion settlement, including compensation for vehicle owners and funding for environmental remediation. In Germany, prosecutors levied a €1 billion fine. Executives were charged, convicted, or forced into early retirement. Some faced prison sentences. The scandal became one of the largest corporate fraud cases in automotive history. But the cost was not only financial, it was reputational. Before 2015, Volkswagen ranked among the most trusted brands in the world. Surveys consistently placed it near the top for perceived reliability and integrity. After Dieselgate, those rankings collapsed. In key markets, customers who had purchased diesel vehicles believing they were environmentally responsible felt deceived. The betrayal was personal. This was not a defective part or a safety recall. It was a lie embedded in software, repeated millions of times every time the engine started. Competitors moved quickly to capitalize. Toyota, which had long bet on hybrid technology instead of diesel, emphasized its commitment to transparency. BMW and Mercedes distanced themselves publicly, stressing compliance and cooperation with regulators. Tesla, still a niche player at the time, benefited indirectly as electric vehicles gained moral legitimacy. The scandal did not just hurt Volkswagen. It reshaped the narrative of the entire automotive industry. Inside Volkswagen, the crisis triggered a strategic reset. New CEO Matthias Müller pledged cultural change. Compliance structures were overhauled. Decision-making processes were decentralized. Most significantly, Volkswagen committed to an aggressive shift toward electric vehicles. Billions were allocated to battery development, new platforms, and charging infrastructure. Diesel, once a pillar of the brand, was quietly deprioritized. The future, Volkswagen argued, would be electric, transparent, and sustainable. Yet the transition was not simple. While Volkswagen invested heavily in electrification, it continued to rely on profits from traditional vehicles to fund the shift. Unlike Jaguar's decision to halt production entirely, Volkswagen chose continuity. Existing models remained on sale. Customers were not forced to choose between waiting and leaving. The company absorbed the reputational hit while maintaining operational stability. It was a slower, more conservative response, shaped by the lesson that abrupt breaks carry their own risks. By the early 2000s, signs of recovery emerged. Volkswagen became one of the largest sellers of electric vehicles in Europe. The ID series gained traction. Financial performance stabilized. In some markets, consumer trust began to return. But the shadow of Dieselgate never fully disappeared. Court cases continued. New revelations surfaced. Former executives remained entangled in legal proceedings years after the initial exposure. The story refused to end cleanly. What made Dieselgate particularly damaging was not the scale of the deception, but its nature. Volkswagen did not miscalculate demand or misread a trend. It understood the rules and chose to circumvent them. This distinction mattered. Customers can forgive mistakes. They struggle to forgive intentional deceit, especially when it contradicts the very values a brand claims to represent. Volkswagen sold honesty as a feature, then violated it systematically. Internally, documents revealed a culture where bad news struggled to travel upward. Engineers felt pressure to deliver impossible results. Targets were set without realistic paths to achievement. In that environment, software became a shortcut, and the shortcut became policy. No single line of code destroyed Volkswagen's reputation. A system did. A system that rewarded outcomes without interrogating methods. The broader industry took notice. Regulators tightened testing procedures. Real-world emissions testing became mandatory in many regions. Software scrutiny increased. The era of trusting laboratory results alone ended. In that sense, Dieselgate changed more than Volkswagen. It changed how cars are regulated worldwide. A decade later, the numbers still tell the story. $35 billion in direct costs, millions of vehicles recalled or modified, dozens of executives implicated, one brand promise permanently altered. Volkswagen survived, but it emerged different, more cautious, more controlled, less willing to claim moral high ground. The lie was expensive, but the lesson was permanent. There is a temptation to frame Dieselgate as a turning point, a moment when everything went wrong. The reality is more gradual. The scandal was the result of years of small decisions, each justified, each rationalized, each pushing responsibility further away. By the time the truth surfaced, the damage was already irreversible. For businesses watching from the outside, the lesson is not about diesel or emissions. It is about alignment. When a company's messaging outruns its capabilities, pressure fills the gap. When that pressure is not released through honesty, it finds other outlets. In Volkswagen's case, it found software. In 2015, Volkswagen sold millions of cars customers believed were clean. In 2016, it began paying billions to undo that belief. By the time the market moved on, the cost had already been absorbed, but the trust had not fully returned. Engineering excellence can build a reputation over decades. A single decision can fracture it overnight. Volkswagen learned that lesson at a price few companies could survive. The company still exists. The brand still sells cars. But the words clean diesel have disappeared. Not because the technology failed, but because belief did. Trust, once coded out, is harder to reinstall.